Okay, for the second use case, what I want to demonstrate here is how to gauge the potential importance or significance of a business threat. So, for example, let's say you're in the dairy business, and we've all heard about the growing concerns around genetically modified, quote-unquote, dairy. In essence, the idea that genetically modified grains fed to the cow could be impacting the milk produced in some sort of a negative way. So let's say this is an issue that we wanted to examine and explore further. I would quite simply start the search with the most important context, which is here milk, again, from the perspective of the consumer. Let's not use the word dairy. That's an industry term. So we'll start with the basic term milk. Obviously, this will be quite a mainstream term, so I wouldn't be surprised to see, there you go. So it's 96.6% on the adoption curve, addressing the majority of the market. Makes sense. But of course, that's not really what we're looking for. We're looking for discussions about milk in the context of GMO. So I'm going to try to find non-GMO here to see if that is a term. So I'm just typing non-GMO here. There we go. So you see that that's a topic here that exists within our database. So I would add that as a second topic to provide greater context into the first topic. And now you look at the relationships, and immediately you know that we've probably arrived at the right search topics here to help us explore the idea of non-GMO milk from the consumer's perspective. So I hit apply here and see how the results change. Just give it a second as it loads. So there we go. One of the first things you can see here is that the core market for non-GMO milk is a maximum of 13 million people. And the addressable market is 189 million, which is basically the entire population of the United States between the ages of 18 and 64. And because our database, and a quick reminder, because our database only covers consumers between the age of 18 and 64, this basically represents the addressable market is basically the entire U.S. population. But of course, today it's addressing on and off. It's addressing about 13.5 million people as part of the core market. The other thing it's also teaching us is that it's very nascent in its adoption, only affecting about 1.5% of the addressable market today. And then, of course, as usual, gives us a breakdown of the sociodemographics. I don't see anything groundbreaking here other than that there's a little bit of an over-indexing on the middle class, but generally nothing really significantly different from national averages here when we look at the actual breakdown. The other part that you can also take a look at is, and it is interesting, is that almost 50% of the audience here is university educated or has master's degrees and so on. And then, of course, you can look at the ethnography portion to understand the dominant motivations affecting people's perception of non-GMO milk or genetic modification in the context of milk here. So the top motivation is feeling control of my consumption. They feel that society, corporations, governments, people, do everything in its power to take control away from consumers, and this is how they exercise some of their control back. Look at the top attitude: large corporations only care about money, or that buying local is better for the environment. What this straight away does is, if you are evaluating the potential threat of non-GMO milk on your dairy business, what this does is basically gives you an instant blueprint on some of the conversations you need to be having out in the marketplace in order to change people's minds and to ease their concerns around the issue itself. So, for example, addressing some of these attitudes or catering to some of these motivations or solving some of these fears, for example, that what people consume is not just harming their health, but also the environment. Again, look at the values here, sense of community, local community. So really that aspect of local seems to emerge a lot here. So that's one strategy, for example, that you could take is focusing more on the local aspect of the products that, let's say, you bring to market. Not a lot to report here in terms of specific brands and influencers in the context of non-GMO. milk, which is also good because it also tells us that there really is no industry leader and there is space here to shape that. And then, of course, the articles here will give us additional context into exactly what's being talked about in the news media when it comes to non-GMO milk and if this is something that is truly a concern and how important that threat needs to be. So again, just a quick example of how in a matter of a couple of minutes, you've evaluated a really important threat potentially to your business. You've got some initial insights around what kinds of motivations, attitudes, values, and fears drive the consumer. You know how big or small that particular trend is. And importantly, you also know all the important relationships that you should probably be exploring in the context of or related to non-GMO milk. For example, issues around corn syrup, dairy allergies, potentially around organic produce, things like that. And you also know that it really is linked to this idea of sugar and health food. Again, not necessarily logical, but certainly, coming right from the mouth of the consumer, and it's important for us to explore these things. And then imagine if, you were planning to go into fields for research to explore this topic further, you would go into field building the ultimate research brief. Already knowing that these are issues at stake, you can now explore some of these issues further and actually achieve much better results and more poignant results from any in-field exploration. That ends use case number 2.